Welcome to Chapter 8, which we are covering orientation and employee training. As I state in all videos, this video needs note-taking because guess what? Questions will be on quizzes and exams. So take good notes and let's get to work. Chapter 8. We're going to define orientation and describe an orientation kit, define training, and describe a needs assessment that's taken. You'll hear about that a lot within companies. And then we're going to outline 3 categories of training objectives. Describe job rotation, define a virtual classroom, explain the basis of an apprenticeship training, outline 7 principles of learning, list 4 areas of training evaluation. So orientation, many and most of you have taken part in a job orientation. That's where you're introduced to the organization, your individual work units, and the job itself. And of course, there's distinct levels that the orientation is conducted within. You have your organizational orientation that is going to give you an overview of the organization as a whole. You'll learn about the mission, vision, so on and so forth. In your departmental and job orientation, it's more specific to the department in which you work and the job that you are holding. So there's various objectives to company orientation programs. It helps to reduce your stress. You're new to the company. You're overwhelmed. You're not sure what to expect. Are you overdressed, underdressed? Are you qualified? Maybe you shouldn't have put on your resume that you actually knew how to do a certain program. No, I'm joking, but people do it, right? And it also helps to lower startup costs because when you integrate an employee into the organization, if you go through an orientation program, there's less startup costs that are involved, right? It helps to reduce turnover because if you come in and you understand the rules and the culture of the organization, you understand your role within the organization, then you're less overwhelmed and you're not just sitting there wondering, why am I here and what am I supposed to do? So truly embedded, very effective orientation programs help to minimize a lot of these barriers and stressors that employees face. There are some companies that call themselves having orientation programs, and it's just a check the box. Their orientation program consists of giving you a HR packet and saying welcome aboard. And so, of course, your stress is still high, and most likely you're going to bail on the company. If not within the first 90 days, it'll be soon after. In many cases. So and if these are based on really genuine, effective programs. Some other things that you can that you notice in orientation programs is that there's a reduction in the amount of time that's required to integrate you into a job. When they have effectively built out an orientation program and considered all of the variables and obstacles and fears and stressors, you can actually help to get you, the employee, embedded into the company where you're working productively in your role. It also helps you as the employee to adjust to your work team or your work environment quickly. Sometimes in orientation programs, they'll introduce you to other members of the team. You get to hear their stories, and it kind of gives you a walkthrough. So it can be very helpful. So there's a shared responsibility that takes place between HR and your immediate manager. And in HR, they're responsible for initiating and coordinating both levels of the orientation, right? And your immediate manager is responsible for conducting the departmental and job orientation. So the two are supposed to work together. And some organizations that don't have an HR department, or they don't have a strong enough HR department, uh, you know, it really sometimes is just the paperwork is that's it. They give you paperwork and you fill out the packet and then they send you on your way. But it's really not an orientation. So to make sure that you're having both of these individuals or departments working together to help bring you into the company, it's truly vital to your success. Now, the organizational orientation is going to share with you various topics of relevance and interest that all employees benefit from. In your departmental and job orientation, it's going to be really specific to that department and the job. So organization is the overarching big umbrella, covers everyone. Departmental and job orientation covers the departments and the specific jobs. And I mentioned that earlier. So in a kit, you will have a packet that has written information in there that's for all new employees. The HR department is supposed to prepare it, and it's supposed to be designed to give you enough information to help you get rolling in your job. It's supposed to be enough but not too much, where it's so overwhelming that there's no way for you to retain and really take in the information that they're providing you. This also is required in unionized organizations to help protect against grievances. And it's also very important in non-unionized organizations to, especially when you're dealing with wrongful discharge lawsuits. So these kits are very valuable. Now, the length and time of your orientation varies. There are some sessions that are very brief. They're less than 2 hours. They spread over several days. Some are a little longer, but it's really based on the type of company and the temperament of those involved. This helps to increase your chance of understanding the information that's given to you as well as retaining it, so that you're not coming back days and weeks later saying, so I don't get it, right? It's really one of those that they're trying to help get you embedded in the process so that you're then prepared for a more intense and rigorous training after that. So there's should be, I almost slipped and said always, but there should be follow-up and evaluation that's conducted by your manager and the HR department. Your manager would be checking with you to see on your performance and answering any questions that you have after you've undergone training. The HR department is supposed to follow up with you after you've been on the job for a month, and they're supposed to then also conduct an annual evaluation of the total orientation program. That's always not the case. It really should be, but it's not the case. So hopefully when those of you who are interested in careers in HR, hopefully you will be able to identify this at the companies where you currently work, as well as future companies, and possibly make some recommendations at those companies now or in the future. Sometimes it's better after you get your degree, though, because they say, and who are you and what do you know? At least if you have a degree in it, you can say, well, I have a degree in HR. So there you go. Now, something else that takes place is feedback. And this feedback is your feedback on the orientation process. And it is a way to evaluate how effective the company was in implementing that orientation program. And there should be some questionnaires and in-depth interviews or group discussion sessions that allow you to be able to share your feedback about the process. And when the organization compiles this information, it then helps them to adapt the program to specific scenarios. and to consider the different suggestions that you shared from your feedback, so that if they have to modify certain steps or processes, this is a great time for them to be able to do so. Now, your training. This is where you're now learning how to acquire various skills, and you're picking up concepts and the rules or attitudes that will help with your performance in your job. The reasons for training are clear. It's money, social, there's tech involved, and of course there's various government changes, right? The economic impact of you being trained or not is the difference between a company thriving and crashing, right? So there's very valuable to make sure that employees are trained in their jobs, roles, positions, so on and so forth. And there are various changes that an organization plans for the future, and that's funny. So ignore that. You see that line where it says planned organizational changes twice. Uh, I think that's a double emphasis, right? McGraw-Hill did the PowerPoint. Uh, so that is a reason for training or for planned organizational changes. That way, for within organizations, they're constantly changing, right? Life is about change. And when you are properly trained, when there's a need for changes, they can actually implement within your training certain elements that you may not be using currently, but you may be using in the future for those planned organizational changes. So if we already know that we're going to pivot in 6 months, we're not going to wait to train you on certain elements in 6 months. We'll start to roll out the training to you now. So, for instance, that's one example. You can also reduce performance problems within your company. If you have highly skilled workers, you have been training them and evaluating them on their performance, then when they slack in certain areas, you're able to identify those areas and make changes. But it's really difficult to do if they're not trained because they're going to make blunders left and right. So this can help reduce those problems in those areas. There's also the consideration for regulatory, contractual, professional, and even certification issues that can arise. And certain certification requirements state that employees have to be trained at a certain level, or they need some kind of, you have to be able to show that they have some kind of educational or, real-time, real-life experience. So those things are very valuable. So here's some of the steps to have a successful training program. You have to be able to perform job analysis and a needs assessment, establish your training objectives, conduct a training program, and then, of course, you have to evaluate the outcomes. Did it work? How well did it work? In what areas did it not work? And those are the 5 steps. Now, a needs assessment, I love doing needs assessment because it's going to say clearly what is it that we need, and what areas are we missing? Is there like a gap? Is there we need to fill? And so we're going to look at the specific training activities and see how we can go about achieving our objectives. And you can gather your assessment through examining documents, creating focus groups, and getting their feedback from those groups. Direct observation, actually watching employees when they're performing their various tasks. And then, of course, you have your questionnaires and your interviews and your surveys that you can use. Sometimes uh, the interviews and the surveys and the questionnaires, sometimes they can be a little, slanted and um, obscure, because sometimes employees fear like there's going to be some kind of recourse for being blatantly honest about certain things. But when you make it clear that this is to help see what the company needs, or if you have it where it's anonymous, then you can get more honest feedback. Um, but needs assessments are also done not only internally from, with your management team and HR teams working together, but needs assessments are also done when you have an outside agency or a firm who is coming in to see what your company is in need of, um, to be able to bring up um, productivity and performance and other measurable things. So there's a great benefit to doing this assessment. Here's in figure 8.4, there's a questionnaire, and there's a few questions that were selected on a needs assessment. And you of course you circle yes or no. If you believe that you need training in that skill, and you see on there, it says, how to more effectively manage my time, or how to handle stress on the job. And if you're not certain, of course, you circle the question mark. So here's, 6 questions that, someone created. And of course, they get more in depth and they go into different areas. But at least here, a manager can then see that if a employee put that they need help on how to improve their personal productivity, then guess what? You now know how to zoom in to help with that, or you know how to introduce an app that can help with employees' productivity, for instance. So how do you go about establishing training objectives? It should state what the result will be for the organization, the individual that's being trained, the department, and what the objective is going to be after training is completed. And everything should be described and detailed in writing. So at the end of the day, at the end of training, what are we expecting to take place? That needs to be in writing, not just verbally done, because why? You can't hold anyone accountable, and they can't hold you accountable. And then to be able to evaluate a program to see how efficient it is, it really does depend upon how well you define the objectives of the program. So if the objectives are poorly defined, then you are not going to be able to effectively evaluate how efficient that program is, right? It's too many holes and it looks like Swiss cheese. So you have to have properly defined objectives. And then from there, you can do an evaluation. So there are some categories that you have with these training objectives. As you see, there's the instructional objectives, organizational, departmental, and then you have your individual performance and growth. And some people may wonder, well, why is the individual performance and growth included? Because if you're not focused on employees being able to perform individually and to be able to have a sense of growth where they're actually learning and retaining information and being able to build upon their skill set, then you're really not, your focus is off. The business should always be focused on the top priority, which is also the largest expenditure of monies, is your employees. And so you need to make sure you pour enough into them so they give you enough on the backside. Now, on the job training, right? This is some methods of training that we have. On the job training includes showing an employee how to perform the job, allowing the job to be done under the trainer's supervision. With job rotation, it's also known as cross training, and many of you have probably been involved with that. And you're learning several different jobs in your unit or your department, and you're performing each job for a specific period of time. Now, there's some advantages and disadvantages of on-the-job training. Advantages could be that you're found to be more effective than classroom training, right? Because you're actually doing it hands-on. A disadvantage is that the pressures of the workplace can actually cause instruction of the employee to be haphazard or neglected. With apprenticeship training, you're giving instruction on and off the job, right? And it's in a practical and theoretical aspect, and the length varies by occupation. Apprenticeship training can be very helpful because you are learning how to work in a highly skilled occupation. Now, classroom training is very useful for when you need to quickly get some information out to large groups of people and they have little to no knowledge about the subject. So you can be able to put 30 plus people in a classroom, and this is especially helpful for those that are in technical, professional, and even managerial areas within a company. Now, the virtual classroom, which is what you guys are engaging in with me, this is where you integrate the online teaching and your learning environment into a lecture-based system. You have the chat rooms, emails, websites. You can even do some desktop video conferencing. I've tried that before. It's a little difficult because not everyone is using their virtual experience the same way in this for our Blackboard classes. But at the university where I teach, we've been able to, a couple of times, been able to do the video conferencing. So anyway, you have to actually have everyone on the same page to pull it off for a school type classroom. But for the workplace, the desktop video conferencing works very well. Now you can do it as a self-paced course. You can do it in real time, right, where you have some intranets, and you can also do real time through video conferencing. So virtual classroom can be very helpful in the workplace. Of course, you have to make sure that you have the technology in place for everyone to be engaged in part of the training at the same time. Now, there's some areas of training evaluation. We have reaction, learning, behavior, and results. So with reaction, how much did the trainees like the program? With the learning, what concepts and facts were learned during the program? And the behaviors, did their behavior change because of the program? And then finally, the results. What were the results? Did this help reduce our costs? Did it reduce turnover or not? Now, with principles of learning, this is motivation to achieve your personal goals. Remember, I said you have to invest into your employees. And so when you look at some of the objectives of employees, people are really concerned about job security. They don't want to lose their job, right? You may want to quit your job, but you don't want to lose your job. You don't want someone to come in and give you a pink slip, or tell you, sorry, but we just can't keep you. So people are really focused on job security and making sure that the work that they're doing is rewarding both financially and intellectually, that you want your brain challenged as well as you want your pockets fattened, right? You want to be recognized for the work that you do and for the contributions you make. and status, what that means, whether that's that title that you get and where you are on the corporate ladder. Responsibility. Everyone wants to have a sense of responsibility. It's funny because we act like we don't, but in a way we do. We like when someone can delegate something to us, and we can, and people are coming to us, and we're responsible for other people and projects and so on and so forth. And achievement. We want to be able to achieve something. That's the reason why so many of us hold on to our high school and junior high medals and awards and stuff. You got these guys who are in their 40s and they have all their high school trophies and their Pop Warner trophies, and you're like, are you serious? But why do we do that? Because um, we have this thing for achievement. We thrive off of it. So these are our motivators. And the various principles of learning is with knowledge, you have results and feedback that come from it. And those influence our learning process. And so it helps that we keep you, the employee, or me, the employee, informed about our progress against the standard. So if the standard is that you are to make 100 widgets, and let's say I'm at 89 widgets, you need to let me know. Natasha, you're at 89 widgets. The standard's at 100. So at that point, then I can see when I'm getting closer and closer to the hundreds. Why? Because it can help me set my goal. If the standard's 100, I may set a goal of 105 because I want to be a high achiever. Because why? I want to have some job security, and it's intellectually rewarding, and it can be financially rewarding. I'll be recognized for it. I could possibly increase my status, and I may get some more responsibility, right? So keeping me informed of my progress can help me set goals. Oral explanations and demonstrations are tools used for providing feedback to you, the trainee, and to me, the trainer, or vice versa, right? And so we do things in writing, but we also, of course, explain and demonstrate verbally. And your progress, or the progress of a group, can be actually plotted on a chart so that you can see the learning curve. You can see where you started, your growth through the process, and you can actually see how you're tracking over a course of time. Here's a sample of a learning curve that was done in figure 8.6, and you can see the length of training in weeks, days, and hours, or the number of repetitions of training, and that's at the bottom. And then along the left side, you can see the percent of correct responses, and you can see how the plateau, the curve plateaued, as well as you can see the decreasing returns of the curve. So these are used a lot, and these are really great for people who are into measuring quantitatively, right? They want to be able to see those graphs and those charts, the numbers. Now, with all learning, you have to reinforce, right? And this has a lot to do with the fact that it's about behavior and how you modify behavior. And if your behavior is going to lead to a positive consequence, then that behavior will be repeated. If the behavior is going to lead to a negative consequence, then most likely, unless the person's just a glutton for punishment, that behavior won't be repeated. So a positive consequence, there's a reward to it. There's praise and recognition. In the flow of your training program, each segment should be organized so that the individual team members can see the purpose of the training, how it fits into other parts of the program, right? Because if there's no purpose, they're like, why am I here? And if you can't show me how it fits into other parts of the program, I'm wondering, why am I here? Are you just wasting my time? And so then later segments should be built on those that were presented earlier in the program. And then if you have any inconsistencies or gaps in your material, it can really cause some pitfalls in making sure that um, employees are actually learning. So you have to make sure you fill in those gaps, and you have to make sure there's no inconsistencies. You have to address and make right those inconsistencies, because if not, you can literally, um, it's almost like handcuffing people, right? Because they can't go forward, and you really, you at most you can go backwards. So it's very important that those are stayed on top of. And so that's why, you can't present material, training material that you had from several years ago. Because if something is outdated, then you need to bring it up to speed. With that comes practice and repetition. You have to practice the processes, the steps, the maneuvers, whatever, and it has to be a repeated form, because the more you do something, then the more it becomes a habit. It's now embedded in you, and it just is a way of operating, and it helps to enhance your learning. Now, spacing of sessions, meaning you're spacing them out so that they're not piled up on each other, but they're also not so far apart that it's hard for you to be able to properly evaluate the learning. So being able to space it in proper intervals, and making sure that those intervals are most conductive to the type of training that the employees are being involved with. So you can have training that is very comprehensive. It's a whole training, or it can be partial training that is broken up, and that can be dependent upon the specific job or what is being taught or the needs of those that are being trained. And giving the employees a brief overview of the job as a whole, and then later dividing it into portions for in-depth instruction is the successful method in learning. So with that, you've gotten a major overview of what Chapter 8 encompasses. Of course, the authors go into greater detail, but this is the core of the chapter. Hopefully it has been helpful for you, and you can actually look in the organizations where you currently work, as well as past organizations, as well, and then when in future organizations, right, where whether it is a company that you start, or that you decide to consult with, or you join as an employee, look at how they do their orientation and how they conduct training. Training should not just be 30 days or 60 days. Training should be something that takes place throughout the lifespan of you and your job, especially when you're taking on new roles and responsibilities. So look at all of those things. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Thank you. Have a great day.